Please take your seats. This show is about to begin. Please take your seats. This show is about to begin. Please take your seats. This show is about to begin.
Welcome aboard.
Everyone. Hey, good afternoon. Let's please take your seats, and thank you all so much for being here. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Great. Thank you. I'm Ben Gieman. I'm one of the energy reporters with Axios, and Thank you for joining us for our event on Spearheading Sustainable Business. I am one half of the Axios Generate Energy and Climate newsletter, so please subscribe. If you haven't already, you can find it at axios.com/newsletters. And if you're following along with us today on social media, please make sure to use the hashtag Axios House. And so, we've had a great lineup already today, and it's just going to keep rolling today and tomorrow as well. Tomorrow morning, we will have a live viewing of President Biden's United Nations address, followed by a live analysis with some great special guests from the White House and from the United Nations. And then tomorrow afternoon, we'll be hosting a one-on-one conversation with the activist Malala Yousafzai. And so, getting back to today, and without further ado, our first guest is the head of a company that is completely changing the way the climate industry and businesses approach carbon removal. So I'd like to please welcome the CEO of Climeworks, Christoph Gebald. Yeah, thank you for being here. So, one topic on a lot of people's minds, I think, right now is the upcoming US election. And I'd just love to get your sense of what could the outcome of this mean for Climeworks in particular and direct air capture more broadly, especially given some of your ongoing work with the Department of Energy.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank you, Ben, and Axios for having me. And, well, I'd answer the question probably in a similar way as your private banker did when you asked him or her about what to do with your stocks ahead of the election, and they would tell you focus on your long-term targets. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm telling you is we are focused, or we are here in this country for the long run, right? And the second thing I wanted to say is direct air capture or carbon removal more broadly has bipartisan support. And where we do expect some volatility in the next 2 months, clearly, or maybe 3 months until everything is settled, we do not expect too big of changes or volatility to what's currently out there to support us, like infrastructure, support from the Department of Energy, or 45Q tax credits.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that actually dovetails with something I wanted to ask you about more broadly, which is, I think we're going to hear a lot of discussion at Climate Week in the coming days about carbon removal. But I think for a lot of people, it's an industry that's still fairly new on their radar. And so I'd love to get your sense of how has the perception of this industry changed even in the last year since Climate Week of 2023?
Yeah, well, let me start as early as we started. I started the company 2009, and at that time, there was no such thing as climate science saying that you actually need carbon removal. So someone once said at that time, it felt like the early days of the Royal Society when you were discussing, is it a plate or something else, right? The perception over the last 2 years has grown very substantially. And maybe to give you a very, very concrete example on the market, like we and others in this field, we're selling carbon removal credits, and that is maybe one of the best ways to measure the perception of that industry. Mm-hmm. And year to date, 5.7 million tons of carbon removal credits have been sold. If you put that in dollars, that's $2.3 billion. And what that means is that's bigger than the voluntary carbon market, so traditional offsets, right? So that is a massive trajectory this industry went through in the last 2 years. Like 2 years ago, that number was 10 times smaller.
That's amazing. Just in 2 years, it's grown that much. Wow. Yeah, I mean, as the industry grows, one thing that I've found very interesting is that within the carbon removal sector, we're starting to see some mergers and acquisitions. I mean, the biggest one was when Occidental, the huge oil company, bought the direct air capture firm Carbon Engineering. Do you see any more consolidation coming in this industry, whether it's this year, next year, over 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah, well, I think it's a natural thing that you see. There was a handful of companies that goes back to 2009 when we also started our company, Climeworks. And out of those early phase of companies, one was bought by Oxy, and the other was bought by someone else. And well, we are still standing independently, if you want. In the last 3 years, we have probably seen birth of maybe 400 to 800 additional carbon removal startups, mainly going back to support by the Department of Energy, research support and supply side support, bringing a fertile ground for all of those companies. What I do expect, and what we shouldn't neglect, is carbon removal is not something that's scaling in the cloud. That's hardware, mostly hardware that has to be built. So there's a lot that needs to be done in the fields and to be learned. And we have gone through that exercise. We put the first plant out in 2017, that's 7 years back. The earliest competitors are right now starting to put out plants. And I think there will be a lot of learnings from that. And to answer your question, what will I see? What do I expect in the next 5 to 10 years to happen? Currently, we probably have a technology platform of 5 to 10 different approaches on how to capture CO2 from the air. And I do expect that maybe on the time horizon of 2030, this will gravitate towards 2 technology platforms. And several names or brands, so to say, will use those platforms. Similar to an iOS platform, an Android platform, it's very typical that in technology, things gravitate towards maybe 2 platforms.
And what would you see as those 2 platforms in the direct air capture industry being?
Well, obviously, there's a strong bias in saying that the technology we're proceeding is one of the winning ones. So we, to maybe very briefly explain the details, we have a solid filter material. It's like a foam, a very porous type of structure that has an affinity towards CO2. So we put it in touch, and the CO2 sticks on the surface once it's exposed to air, and then we heat it, and it releases again the CO2. That's one way of capturing CO2 from the air. The other one is with liquids, right? And then there are many others. I do expect that a solid process, as Climeworks is having one, and a liquid process, as a company called 1.5, owned by Occidental Petroleum, is having one, can be winning technologies by 2030.
Thank you. And sticking on this idea of industry evolution for a moment, is Climeworks on the hunt for other companies who perhaps have a slice of the attractive technology or part of the supply chain or some piece of the sector that you might be interested in? Are you on the hunt for acquisitions? And I have to ask, would you ever entertain offers from, say, a gigantic oil company or other gigantic energy company?
Well, yes, and yes. Or reject. Wait, sorry. Let me.
Let's take them in sequence.
Yeah. Let me rephrase. So first of all, we have acquired already a company. Like I think that was maybe 2018, 2019 timeframe. So we do monitor the market actually quite intensively and watch out for new technologies that can help our technology to be more efficient. Mm-hmm. I always say we have the only running plant out there globally. Like we have a running direct air capture, actually 2 of them in Iceland. And it's sort of like the first running car, right? And we're totally open, and this is happening, we're seeing that there are other companies having components that make the car better, right? Less fuel consuming, better engines, you name it. So we try to integrate those parts in our platform. The second thing that we started to do is we started by direct air capture credits, meaning building machines that pull carbon dioxide from the air and put it in the ground, right? Now, what we did over the last year, we extended our offering towards other high-quality, non-direct air capture credits. Like at the moment, if companies buy credits, carbon removal credits from Climeworks, it can only be direct air capture, but it could also be a portfolio of, say, afforestation credits, biochar credits, bioenergy carbon capture and storage credits to address that. So also in this domain, we're of course keeping our eyes open and see either what credits can we buy or maybe there are companies out there. Now on the second part of the question, how do we see the future of financing? And I'd say I'd be open for everything that helps our purpose, right, to move this forward. And clearly, what I do think is that large energy majors have to sit on the table when it comes to scaling that, because they have a lot of knowledge and workforce in a domain that's very relevant for what we are trying to solve, right?
Yeah.
Think about pipelines, underground storage. So they have to be on the table to scale this. Now, whether an acquisition of the company is the right vehicle for that, TBD, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they can be parties in projects, or maybe they can have a license in order to scale that. But I think there's not a single solution that is right or wrong. I think it's a continuum of approaches that we have to look at. But what I think is wrong is to say we go entirely without them.
Yeah.
Because at times, I think this is, people don't like to hear that. There's something called the moral hazard. Sometimes people say there's the risk that what we do extends the life of oil and gas. And I do think that doesn't make any sense. We need to have them on the table in order to scale that as quickly as we need.
Thank you. Another thing that's a couple other questions I had. One is, what do you see as we often hear that for removal to become this powerful weapon against climate change, you need to get to the billion-ton scale. What year do you see that occurring? How many years away are we from billion-ton scale?
25.
25 years.
25, okay. Yeah. 2050 is a very likely. And I can spell it out for you. 2030 will be the time when carbon removal will be operating on a 1 million ton per year scale, right? And I'm very, very convinced that with the right policy, the right supply chains, gravitation to the 2 technology platforms that I mentioned, so that supply chain can indeed focus on 2 platforms and not on 7 or 8 platforms. Yeah. I'm very convinced that in a 20-year horizon, you can scale 1,000 times, like from a megaton platform to a gigaton platform. And if we look back, I always get confidence when we have seen that already in the past, and we have seen that in solar. Solar in the year 2000 was a gigawatt globally of installed capacity. In 2020, it was 1,000 gigawatts. In the year 2000, the investments that went into solar were cumulative, something like 10 billion, right? Yep. I do expect that by 2030, cumulative investments in our domain is maybe 10 billion. Wow. So there are quite some similarities, and that gives me the confidence that we can repeat that. But solar was successful with super powerful policies, yep. And that is the assumption.
And of course, solar is something that was long underestimated. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the same, and perhaps a lot of people here have seen the same famous chart that I have. If you look at a lot of analyst estimates of the growth of solar going when they were estimating in 2000, 2010, everybody vastly undershot the ultimate, the amount of growth that we've seen. I mean, one thing that we often hear that is something of a benchmark for your industry is getting down to a cost of $100 per ton of removal. Do you see that as a feasible goal? And if it is, if we could ask you to, keep looking into that crystal ball as to when that might occur.
I do think that $200 is a realistic target. I do think that $100 is a stretch target. Okay. Like, I'm not excluding it. When I started the company, a lot of people told me, what you will do is impossible. Don't do it. Yeah. But I wanted to do it. So there's a certain degree of openness in me. Mm-hmm. So I want to be like close to this openness already today and don't say no to $100, but simply from knowing what I know today, I do think that we should aim at $200. Mm-hmm. And we might hurt ourselves if we put out too low numbers, because then policies will be made for $100, but they might not help you to what I just mentioned before, right? Yeah. To scale properly. Nevertheless, I think at $200, this makes sense. Like, if we act today, right? Mm-hmm. If we are serious about reductions, then the pie for removals is 10%. It's globally 5 gigatons, 5 to 10 gigatons. Mm-hmm. And it's totally feasible to apply a $200 on that, right? If we're not serious about reductions and the removal pie will be correspondingly higher, then of course, $200 can become a very high figure. But in my point of view, a good advice to all of us is to think rather 200 than 100. Yep. And the time frame, you ask, when will that kick in? I do think more importantly than the time frame is actually the volume installed. And this is maybe something like a 500 million to 1 gigaton platform that you need to be in place, which is presumably 2045
to get that
to 2050 time frame. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. we're starting to run a little low on time. One thing, I think there's a lot of interest here at Climate Week and alongside the UN General Assembly in what's going to happen at COP29 in a few weeks. Now, increasingly at these COP summits, we've seen particular buckets of technologies start to get some type of recognition, target, shout-outs in different ways, whether it's in a formal summit text or a side agreement. That's all a long-winded way of asking, what are your hopes for COP29, and would you like to see some type of particular role for carbon removal in the outcome of COP29?
Well, the title of the next COP is financing, and a missing piece that we currently have, we have very good early day financing for what we do, and there's infrastructure financing at some point, toll roads, 12% IRR risk profile of a toll road. I'm afraid that we're neither nor currently. We're neither a early day equity investment or a VC investment, nor are we a fully de-risked infrastructure investment. So we're in this middle where things are sort of profitable, but they're not in the teens of what is required. So if governments said, for example, we're giving an IRR guarantee to such projects, that would help to unlock capital from infrastructure investors to deploy and scale. That would be something super powerful.
Is that something that can be enabled or furthered by a COP summit?
Well, maybe rather Climate Week and rather on a more local level like the US. I wouldn't expect that on a global level like a UN party conference. But yeah, maybe a G7 or a COP committing to that, of course, would be way bigger.
Thank you. And we're starting to run down on time a little bit, so I wanted to ask one final thing, which is, I believe you live in Zurich, right?
Indeed, I live in Zurich, Switzerland, yeah.
If anyone here is lucky enough to visit briefly, what are 2 or 3 things you recommend they would do if they just had a weekend in Zurich?
That's a good question. If you're visiting in summer, a swim in the lake and the river, and you could drink it's as clean as you could drink it in the middle of the city, and then get some healthy food. And if you visit in winter, do the latter the same, get some healthy food, but replace the swim by first a sauna visit on the lake and then jump in the lake. That
sounds incredible. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Christoph, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And please stick around for an exciting next guest with my colleague, Naila Boodoo. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Axios host and editor, Naila Boodoo. I have a question for you all. It's a little poll. If you have ordered something from Amazon in the past month, will you raise your hand? Oh, okay. I should have done that before Kara. I should have done that after Kara Hurst came out. But please welcome the Chief Sustainability Officer for Amazon, Kara Hurst. You missed it. Everyone had their hands up. If you heard that question. Welcome to Axios House. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Kara, let's start with the climate pledge that Amazon co-founded 5 years ago. Now there's more than 525 companies that are on board. Can you explain a little bit more about this, Amazon's involvement?
Yeah, no, we're super excited about that and to be here at Climate Week this year. In 2019, we had been working across Amazon, looking at the science, reading IPCC reporting, and thinking really about what our own ambition was, and thinking about how we could go faster. So we committed to being net zero carbon across our global operations by 2040. And thought one of the big things that we wanted to do was to hopefully inspire others with the size and the scale of our company and our operations, and also work among the many, many industries that we're in across our company to begin to send big demand signals with those industries. But we know we can't do that alone, as big as we are. There's no one industry we can decarbonize. There's no influence that we can have that's big. So we wanted to invite others in, both to do this with us, to share solutions, importantly to share failures, to talk about how we're doing this. And so we said with that commitment, we wanted to create it as a pledge, but more importantly, a community of action. So we co-founded the Climate Pledge with Global Optimism, led by, importantly, Christiana Figueres and Tom Karnak. Christiana, of course, architected the Paris Agreement that was committed to 2050, and the idea was, let's do this 10 years faster. So the Climate Pledge is commitment to net zero carbon by 2040. And then, of course, we hit a global pandemic. We hit a supply chain crisis. We didn't know where this was going to go. But it's amazing to see in 5 years, 525 companies across 59 different industries, 45 different countries. This is a very global effort, a very multi-industry effort. Companies, organizations, we have a football club, we have sports organizations, we have many different kinds of companies joining.
And on a related note, you all recently just started working on some of this in India, in particular looking at last mile charging stations. Can you tell us a little bit about that, the Joint Action Project?
Absolutely. So, of course, we run one of the biggest logistics and transportation networks in the world. And so we've been working for a long time at decarbonizing that part of our business. We committed to buying 100,000 electric delivery vans and putting them on the road by 2030, largest ever order of electric delivery vehicles. And we already have 24,000.
That's here in the U.S. This isn't in
U.S. and
okay.
in Europe. We have already 100,000, I'm sorry, we have 24,000 of those on the road already. In India specifically, where, we know we want to tackle decarbonization, we have a big business in India. We have 7,300 of those on the road. We have a commitment to have 10,000 on the road by 2025. And we also, though, know joint action is very important. So 2 things that we've done, 2 projects in conjunction with Climate Pledge companies. One is called Project Jewel, just launched last week, so very exciting. In Bengaluru, we have a project that we're working with 5 different companies. So Mahindra Logistics, Uber, another company involved in that, where we're working on joint charging stations together. So this is coming together, building those charging stations where we'll share that charging network so we can all charge our EVs. It's creating jobs, it's creating electric charging networks where we'll share that together. The other project is one that's a public-private partnership. Super exciting. Many of you will be familiar with the network C40. So a lot of leading mayors across the world, leading cities that are committed to sustainability. And we created a partnership with C40. And we're doing this in 4 cities in India, 6 in Latin America, where we're working on medium and heavy road freight. So this is a little bit of a different part of the transportation logistics supply chain. And we're working on decarbonizing those cities together in conjunction with the mayors and their cities. And really exciting to see that investment. We've put 10 million into it, and we're encouraging other companies. But we have 17 joint action projects going with companies amongst the Climate Pledge. So this is a really action-oriented community, which has been exciting.
And what is the philosophy? How would you describe the philosophy from Amazon's standpoint as a corporate citizen when it comes to sending, for example, demand signals to the rest of the industry?
I think, one of the things that's so important that we hear over and over again is pledges are great, ideas are great, commitments are great, but action's where it's at. And one of the best ways that the private sector can demonstrate action is by making an order, sending a demand signal. That old expression, put your money where your mouth is. Are you serious about this? Are you going to place an order for electric vehicles? Are you going to purchase renewable energy? And so when I think about, again, the scale that we have, or collectively, the scale that we all have, if you're a smaller company, what can you do, collectively with other companies? I'm really proud that our company has been the largest purchaser of renewable energy for the last 4 years running. So that is a thing that we invested in. And that means, we want to say, we think wind and solar are incredibly important. We made a commitment to be 100% renewable across our global operations by 2030 when we committed to the pledge. We looked at that. We looked at wind and solar, utility scale, thought we can go faster. We moved that up to 2025. And we've been working on that, investing, frankly, billions of dollars. We've been moving at scale. And we actually hit it in 2023. So we are now 100% renewable across our global operations. We match that energy. And, these are the kinds of things. We have a 28 gigawatt portfolio. And I know a lot of companies are working on this, and there's a lot of things, when you send those demand signals. Another one is in these buyers alliances. Mm-hmm. So we've worked with the maritime industry and created Zero Emission Maritime Buyers Alliance. So this is working with ports, working with companies like Maersk, who signed the pledge, where we came together and said, we want solutions. We're going to need green hydrogen. We're going to need transformation of old port infrastructure. And we want to send a signal that we want zero emission ships. But Maersk can't, and others can't transform their supply chains unless they hear from folks like us who demand this as customers, right? Same goes for many of these different industries. So we issued an RFP collectively with 26 different companies. And now they can go back to their boards of directors and say, our customers demand this. So these demand signals are so, so important. We hear this over and over and over again.
Well, and it's interesting as we're talking about Amazon's role as a convener, but you mentioned the customer. And I think most Amazon customers think about packaging. And when you say, like, you're the CSO for Amazon, they want to, and I'm always scrutinizing my Amazon packages. I have to say, I'm always sort of looking at what do they come in. I'm just curious how many more consumers are choosing less packaging, grouping deliveries together, the things that you all are offering to try to reduce waste on that end.
Yeah, absolutely. If you work at Amazon, you hear about packaging a lot. And that's great. One of the things we've been working on for well over a decade is both reduction of the packaging material. So hopefully any of you who are customers and ordering from Amazon are seeing less packaging material come to you. You may have even seen the item come to you with no packaging. That's called ships in product packaging. Where you just get an item with a label. Sometimes it's jarring to people. They're not sure why they got that, but that's an actual program we're trying to accelerate, where we ship an item to you just with the label on it. And sometimes it comes in a new material. That's another thing we do. We try to reinvent packaging materials, so fully recyclable materials that people could put, in their what we call a blue bin in the United States, or in a way that becomes fully circularized. And we actually have even on my team a materials science group and a materials lab in Seattle, where we work on packaging material and reinvent materials. And we're doing a lot of work on the circularity of those materials. So it's everything from thinking about the life cycle of the materials, new materials invention, to thinking about reducing the materials themselves. It's a win for us. It takes cost out of the business. It's certainly a win for the customer. You don't want that waste at the end of the day. And it saves all around. So it's good for business, good for the customer.
As a chief sustainability officer, I wonder how you think about efforts that, I don't know if your brain works this way, if you're thinking about these sort of individual versus corporate efforts, or maybe more accurately, consumer efforts versus corporate efforts.
Well, certainly I think about all of them. I'm a customer. It's one of the reasons I wanted to come work at Amazon. I loved the company. I loved shopping online. And I think one of the things you want to do is make it really easy for people. So we've also created programs for our customers. We have something called Climate Pledge Friendly, which allows you to filter your shopping. And we've created a badge. We have over 4 million products in this program now. And we've created this, we work with our science team to create the highest bar of carbon reducing and sustainable. There's a lot of eco labels out there. So we kind of always research what are the best of the best. And then we work with other, of these eco labels to say, like, we enroll them in the program, and then work with other consumer product companies to teach them about that and get that label onto their product. One thing I will tell you is we have new data on this. And so we have seen a 12% sales lift for products in the first year of this program. That is amazing.
So for people saying that it's very interesting, because Ali Zaidi was here earlier and talking about having a culture shift and thinking about how we change culture to have people investing in something that may be more expensive, but was built to last longer, or with a more green, with less of a carbon footprint.
Well, ideally, it shouldn't be a trade-off. Ideally, you want to give people, we're about selection and, low cost and sustainability. I don't think it has to be a trade-off.
So you have held a variety of jobs. You started off in government, in academia, and now in the private sector. How much of your job is translating all of these things to different audiences and just sort of speaking a language, or translating what you're saying to whoever the audience is at the time?
I would say every day, all day.
What's the big difference? Like, would you say?
I like to think about it as sort of like people who are multilingual. I speak NGO, I speak academic, I speak science, and I speak corporate. And I think that's really important because we do speak different languages. And I think one of the things that we become way too precious about in sustainability is our language and our jargon. And I think we have to knock it off, frankly. And I think we need to really democratize all of this and make it very accessible and invite a lot more people into this conversation.
As you think about that and inviting a lot more people into this conversation, we've been ending on one fun Climate Week thing. And I wanted to ask you about your mindset. I think sometimes we say, like, what is your tip for being more sustainable? But I want to just ask you more instead about how you cultivate that mindset of sustainability and consumption.
One thing, well, I don't know if this is exactly an answer to your question, but one thing I know I'm working a lot on and our teams is being joyful and optimistic about this, because I think it's incredibly important if you're going to do this work to have hope. There are incredible solutions out there. I have the real privilege of seeing a lot of those. They're not necessarily all yet at scale. Can you share something that you've just thought of recently that fits this? We have a company, we have a climate pledge fund, and we invest in early stage decarbonizing solutions. I was able a little while back to go see a group we invest in called Hippo Harvest. They're doing robotic farming where we're growing lettuces with next to no water, no pesticides, and it was incredible. And there was a bunch of folks down in California growing these lettuces with what I think is going to be, a revolutionary technology. People are coming up with incredible things, or electric aviation, or new electrolyzers for the hydrogen economy. People are so creative, and these solutions do exist. We have to get behind them. Women are a lot of times behind them, and we're not funding women enough. So we have a climate gender equity fund. I'm going to plug as much stuff as I can here. But no, I think that, there's so many reasons to be hopeful. And I think that there's a reason to have hope. We still have time. And I think cultivating a lot of that hope and joy and optimism and, not being proprietary about your solutions and sharing as much about, what's out there and how things are working and where you've, tried and tested and, something's working or where it's failed and why it's failed is incredibly important. And so we're just trying to do as much of that as possible.
Well, thank you for taking the time to share some of that with us today. Amazon's Chief Sustainability Officer, Kara Hurst. And
thank you so much.
You guys want to stay right here? We're going to have a quick word with our publisher, and after that, our final guest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Good evening. I'm Nicholas Johnston. I'm the publisher of Axios. We are in the home stretch here of our first day at Axios House at Climate Week, our very first Axios House at Climate Week. I'm very grateful for all of you folks. Some people, I think, have been here all day. So double bonus shout out for them. They are earning their trip to the bar at the back when we're done today. And so a huge thanks to all of our partners who have made the conversations today possible. Also a special thanks to the partners at making this one possible, as well as the bar possible, Suntory Global. And I love all of our partners equally, but this next view from the top conversation is probably going to be the coolest one yet. I want to welcome to the stage an 8th generation whiskey maker, the managing director of Maker's Mark, Rob Samuels. Rob, welcome to Axios House.
How are you? Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
We're here for Climate Week, yes, which is not the first place I thought I'd run into a bourbon maker. So tell me a little bit about how climate change and sustainability factors into what you do and what brings you here.
It really it factors into everything. So don't want to bore the group with a bunch of our family's history, but my grandparents, Bill and Margie Samuels, walked away from a 160-year legacy, actually lit on fire a legacy family recipe because they didn't believe in it, and would go on to chase their dream, which would become the first ever premium or elevated bourbon. And for those of you that have been to our distillery, we're off the beaten path, and they chose the remote location for our site because they were deeply respectful that whiskey is agricultural. And yes, we celebrate manufacturing and the steps of the process that shape the character of the whiskey. But when you take it back, the whiskey in your glass, the ingredients come from nature. And when you try to really appreciate and understand where the flavor comes from, pretty quickly you get to the ethics of it all. And today our distillery is a National Historic Landmark. It sits on a 2,000-acre working farm, and there is, I believe, research around the regenerative practices of agriculture and the sustainability of oak that will help preserve the future of whiskey for the next generation of whiskey drinkers.
That, regenerative agriculture. Like, explain a little bit more about like what that means, how you use it, when you started to use it, and why.
This has been one hell of a journey for us because, we've made whiskey for hundreds of years. And the more we took it back to try to understand the role of soil health on flavor and the role of farming practices on flavor and what are the environmental impacts, it was quite humbling. But for the better part of almost 10 years, our team has been partnering with our 26 growers. So while Maker's Mark began as the first craft distillery in America, over the last 71 years, the brand has grown steadily over time. And we now work with 26 growers in central Kentucky within 30 miles of the distillery that grow corn and wheat on more than 50,000 acres. And we have funded all of the research, all of the education for all 26 of these growers to embrace regenerative agriculture, which is moving away from heavy industrial farming that destroys the topsoil, that heavily relies on pesticides and fertilizers, to this regenerative model. And all of the data that I see suggest that globally there are only about 60 harvests left before all of the topsoil on average globally is completely destroyed. So it was a proud moment for us in the fall of last year to become the first distillery that we know of in the world to have all of its distillate certified by a third party as regeneratively grown and sourced.
Has that been an easy journey? What are the challenges to make that kind of choice?
We prefer the difficult path. Which sounds...
Well, then take credit for all the difficulty that you've gone through.
What's really been pretty amazing for me is to have a team that started with 11 team members 71 years ago. Today we have almost 400. The team members that are hand dipping bottles, hand rotating barrels. Everyone is so energized by this vision and committed to living the value system in everything that we do. But yeah, it's not been easy. But when you have an infinite mindset, as the 8th generation of our family, you have to think longer term. And in the end, it's really been pretty wonderful to see all 26 of our growers start to really buy in that this is the future. And it's not just better for Maker's Mark and not just better for the environment, but the farmer, the grower, is prospering economically.
How does this fit into the broader way the industry is going? If you talk to your colleagues or competitors, perhaps, in this space, how do they view that? Is this a broad sort of groundswell?
I think sometimes it's seen as daunting. Right. But what I will say, Regenerative, for those of you that are familiar, Regenerative is one of 2 or 3 certifying bodies, and that's the company that we're working with that actually takes soil samples at the source on the farm to verify the health at the biological level of the soil. And when Maker's Mark was certified by this third party in the fall of last year, the number of distilleries and companies based on the profile of Maker's Mark jumped up like 20 times.
You can do it, then maybe we can do it too. Is that
absolutely, absolutely.
When they come to you and the word you use, daunting, which is sometimes a lot of a word that comes up a lot when I think confronting sustainability issues. What is your answer to that? When you're like, I know you want to take credit for doing it the hard way because that's the right way. But if someone says it's daunting to do this, like how can you help them, or how can you help colleagues or competitors make that decision?
I think for us, and again, it's thinking differently about whiskey. It's really acknowledging that the whiskey in the glass is agricultural and appreciating that it's not just in the environment's best interest to embrace regenerative agriculture, that ultimately you will start with better ingredients. It's all signs point to regenerative agriculture leads to more nutrients and more flavor.
You're part of Suntory Global, a massive global organization that distills and makes a lot of different agricultural products. Do you talk to the tequila guys or the Japanese whiskey guys, share tips and tricks on this?
You know it means everything to me and our family and our team to have a partner in Suntory where we have shared values. Suntory is a global company. They have many, many different businesses, but what they're proudest of in their heart is in whiskey. And when you hear them talk about what they're proudest of, yes, of course, they're proud of the flavor profiles and the innovation and the characteristics of their various whiskey expressions. But what they really believe in, and at the heart of their mission, why they're in business, is they talk about growing for good. That ultimately the success of the company and the brands is in service to the community, which includes all the environmental and sustainability leadership.
I think I'm getting a lot in this message here about how you're viewing these. They're not manufactured, they're not factory products, right? Don't forget where they come from. And I think that's the kind of connection that you're really trying to emphasize, right?
Yeah, and our footprint with Maker's Mark is not just our distillery in Star Hill Farm. It extends way beyond that. It extends to the company that makes our glass bottles. It extends to these 26 growers that grow our ingredients. And that's one of the reasons I really embraced this whole B Corp holistic model for assessing higher purpose, was that yes, sustainability, your own sustainability is a big part of that, but it's much more. How do you engage and treat your team when you're under pressure? What percent of your profit do you give back to society? How sustainably operate, from an operations perspective, is the supply chain?
Sustainability seeps into almost every part of the business. Don't just think about it as one piece.
It's the holistic philosophy.
We're about to get the hook here, so we're going to do one fun thing. This is my last on-stage segment of the night, and so I'm looking forward to going back to the Suntory Global Spirits. What should I have? Oh, right on cue.
Bourbon, of course.
So tell us about this that's available.
Everyone here in the room will be offered a little taste of the oldest ever release from the Maker's Mark Distillery. It's called Cellar Aged. This whiskey is 85% of this whiskey is 13 years old, 15% is 12 years old. It spent half the time in a traditional rick house, and then the remaining half of the maturation took place in our LEED certified, one-of-a-kind limestone whiskey cellar. This whiskey is cask strength. It's rich with character, flavor, creamy, balanced, confectionery notes. And just want to toast everybody for their commitment to this value system, this vision. And we also have a little jar.
You've got one right here next to you.
Of honey from Star Hill Farm. And an open invitation, come see us. We want our distillery in Star Hill Farm to become the most culturally rich, endearing, and environmentally responsible home place of any brand in the world. And we just last week harvested 1,300 pounds of honey from our 200 bee boxes. So we brought a little jar for all of you to enjoy, in addition to the Cellar Aged Maker's Mark. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. We get to open this now, right? We'll bring Hope King up here for the big finish.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Hi. Hello. I like the audience engagement. Good evening, everyone. It is so great to be here with all of you, a packed house for our next and final conversation of the night. I'm Hope King, Axios' senior business reporter, and I have the great pleasure of moderating our next conversation with not one, but two leaders in fashion, apparel, and retail who have been at the forefront of sustainability before it's became really the buzzword that we're all, of course, familiar with now and talking about today. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the CEO of Patagonia, Ryan Gellert, and the CEO of Eileen Fisher, Lisa Williams. Perfect. So both of our speakers today are also models for their brands, in case you want to tag them on their Instagram, and you can shop from there if that is something that you are inclined to do. But Lisa and Ryan, thank you so much for being with us at Axios House. I guess I have to begin with a big question, which is really, planet Earth doesn't have a Venmo account. It doesn't have a Zelle. How is it that you can make money while actually doing good for the planet?
Want to start with me? That's the holy grail. That's what we're doing all day, every day, is trying to figure out that puzzle, to be able to be in business, do it well, do it profitably, and do some good along the way. And it's not easy. It's a combination of a lot of efforts. You got to have financial success. You've got to do the right thing for your people, for the people in your supply chain and your value chain. You've got to do right in terms of your raw material sourcing and your decisions with planet Earth in mind. And it's a constant juggling match to make it happen, and to make it happen in an integrated way.
Yeah, no, I'll just say, first of all, it is so wonderful to be here with you. Lisa and I, as I think you may know, worked together for about 8 years at Patagonia. So to be able to do this event together with Lisa, who's now running Eileen Fisher, is really wonderful. The other thing I'll say quickly is just did shot to Maker's Mark backstage. So there's just this warm glow, both from walking out here and from that as well.
That was supposed to be a secret.
But now to the question. Our mission statement at Patagonia is we're in business to save our home planet. And I think your question hits on both pieces. We are really committed to running our business, making the very best product that we can, making it of the highest quality, doing everything we can to kind of change the system within which we operate in the apparel sector. Quality, use of materials, fair trade certification in our factories, repair at scale, resale at scale, end of life, and with the change in ownership structure a couple of years ago, giving all of our profits to fight the climate and ecological crisis. But it is the combination of those two things. We're in business to save our home planet, and I think Eileen Fisher has got a very similar set of values.
I did not partake in the shot, in case anyone was
You could
curious.
have.
I will wait. I want to read you something that Patagonia wrote, and this is something really that I think gets back to the heart of the question, which is Patagonia saying, everything we make takes something from the planet we can't give back. So again, the question is, I'm skeptical that it's actually possible to do both. Because I think fundamentally, if you're making money, that means you are taking resources, you are putting it into the supply chain, and then you are potentially creating waste. So I guess if you know this at the heart, then I guess why even be in business?
It's a great question. It's one we've wrestled with for 51 years, and here's the answer, as imperfect as it is. We're not a sustainable company. We don't describe ourselves that way. Sustainability is taking less from a system than it can regenerate, and that doesn't define how we are able to run our business today. If anything, we're a responsible company in that we really sweat the details on the decisions that we make. And the big idea behind Patagonia, it's not the money that we've given away or the eco-engineering and R&D development that we've open sourced or anything else. It's truly this belief that perhaps by operating from within the business sector, we can be a model for just thinking about the role and the responsibility of business differently. I would say at 51 years, we haven't proven that yet, but perhaps we've made a small dent in the space, and our ambition continues.
So just so I'm clear, you don't want to be called a sustainable company, is that?
That's not a term that we use to describe ourselves at all.
Eileen, I'm sure you get this a lot, Lisa. Do you agree that you don't want to be considered as Eileen Fisher a sustainable company then?
We try to make sustainable decisions all day, every day, but the idea of being a sustainable company, to Ryan's point, is really not possible. So being a responsible company and doing the best that we can to prove out the business model, likewise, is the point.
One of the things that I told you guys beforehand, before talk, is that I would be wearing Rent the Runway, the bottom, and I am wearing Nuuly, I think, or Mod Lux, one of the others, on the top. But somebody pointed out to me that even renting clothes has an environmental impact, which is a huge bummer. Obviously, I'm thinking about the shipping costs. So if you were to live the most responsible life that you could as someone who consumes food and clothing, what would that look like?
It's all about a conversation of conscious consumption and minimal consumption whenever possible. So my daughter is a big Nuuly fan as well. We have a resale model at Eileen Fisher that we've been doing since 2009, taking back our products. And so it's true, there is no perfect answer. And so it's about being thoughtful and conscious consumers whenever possible. And that's part of this model that we're trying to prove out in both companies is trying to make thoughtful choices, buy less, buy one, buy the best, those types of things. And, you know, it's as a business, it's trying to create tools and education around conscious consumption. I was telling Ryan earlier, we have a couple of things that we've just launched, a seasonal planner as an example, small example, where you can get a look at what's coming in future months so you can make a wise decision as to which one you want and when you might want it. Some tools like that, a closet where you can actually catalog what you might have already in your closet to figure out what you need to supplement it. So it's about that kind of education as well, but recognizing that even with the best raw materials, the best supply chain, it is ultimately not sustainable that way.
So you're saying it starts with the consumer demand?
It's a huge piece of it,
Okay.
and we're two different companies meeting different demands for sure, but it's about trying to it's a relationship between both the company and the consumer.
I wanted to get there right now because you brought it up. Have you heard of the underconsumption core trend online?
I've heard of some version of that in a bunch of different descriptions, no growth, and the basic set of ideals of really making conscious decisions about what impact you have, particularly through purchasing and consumption, yeah.
And do you think that trend will win out? I mean, you have on the one side fast fashion, you have influencers throwing posts in my feed that I didn't ask for, that I don't want. And then you have this new sort of backlash this year emerging with people taking videos of shoes they've had in their closet for 12 years saying, it's perfectly fine to wear this until the soles fall out. Which side will win? The consumption of, you know, all the stuff that influencers are making money off of, or this trend that seems to be in response?
I mean, I'll say this, and I'll steal a quote from Winston Churchill talking about Americans, which is, you can always count on Americans to do the right thing when they've exhausted every other option. And I think that there's something similar here with humanity, candidly, in the face of the climate and ecological crisis. We will have influencers, we will have race to the bottom thinking and business models. You know, today's Shein is yesterday something else and tomorrow something else again. That's the system within which we operate. And there is something on a cellular level with us as humans that sort of triggers that behavior. And we are steadily moving towards a world where there are no more virgin resources and where the costs of making the decisions that we have made as humans are clear and so high that we won't have the option of continuing to do that. So at some point we'll get there. The question is whether we will get there on our own terms or not. And I'm not sure how that'll play through.
And I do think, Lisa.
I was just going to say you're exactly right. And up until the time our hand is forced, I do feel like there's a great momentum building around resale, secondhand, and understanding certainly the next generation customer that everybody's always talking about appreciates that more than the average customer. They're skeptical, more so than the average customer, which is amazing and great because it requires all of us to be on our toes and to be authentic and transparent with what we're doing. But there is a great momentum building. Secondhand is becoming, a norm and a mainstream, which is at least a great sign.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to the supply chain aspect of how you actually scale responsibility, if not sustainability. But first, I wanted to kind of go through more on the consumer side and the thinking. And I was on both of Patagonia and Eileen Fisher's website last night, just seeing what were the best sellers. Everything on Eileen Fisher's best-selling page was over $100. Most. I won't say all. Sorry, most. And I was looking at Patagonia's best-selling Better Sweater Jacket, which is $159, and the infamous VC Vest, which is $119. Is sustainability only for the rich?
Oh, I think not at all. But I think the true cost of apparel, is really the issue. And I think if you frame that question of, is our stuff more expensive than other options in the marketplace? Unapologetically. Is our stuff engineered with use of materials and where and how it's built, how people are paid to build it, repair and service on the back end, in an active, vibrant resale market opportunity? That's the model that we have. And so I think if you look at the true cost of apparel and play that through across the space, I feel really good about the business that we run. I also understand that we make decisions daily to really moderate the pace at which we grow because we're hypersensitive about the impact that we're having through growth. And candidly, we don't always get it right relative to when do we talk about new products, when do we talk about product that's off price, and the seasonal nature of the business that we're in. That's one of the big challenges.
So how do you, Lisa, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say it's a super fair question given the price points of the brands. I do think when we think about secondhand and the resale platforms that we both have, it's a really approachable way to get into the brand, and that has been helpful in sort of addressing the retail challenges.
Let's talk about resale right now. So you, at Eileen Fisher, you have home decor from materials that you guys have taken back. You have artwork, which we could talk about. This is the Waste No More studies series. How do you scale on the back end these taken? And you recently at the company reached over 2 million products that were actually taken back from customers. And I know there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into building that.
Indeed, the idea of scaling that and doing that in a business model that makes it efficient to do so is a real challenge. So first and foremost, we feel a strong responsibility for everything that we put out there. So we're happy to take it back. We have been encouraging it since 2009. That's not to say that we don't end up with so much. So to your point, we're at 2.3 million to date right now, and finding the right home for those things. Of that, only 50% of it is sort of resellable. And so you've got a lot of other product coming back with it that we have the responsibility to disposition in a way that is responsible. So that's a big challenge. A lot of damages that come through in there. So repairing when you can, finding upcycling ways to take the discarded product and use fiber to fiber technology so that we can put those inputs back into new product is a challenge. There's infrastructure scalability issues there that are tremendous. We've got a couple of those coming to market in the next couple of months, so it's doable. But to your point, that scalability is a real challenge. So keeping a hold and your arms around what's coming back as quickly as it is, and being responsible with that, is in fact something that is a cost to the business in general. It is not a profit center in any way.
That was going to be my next question. Are those lines of businesses profitable?
They are not. They're not. In a best case scenario, the way we're doing it right now, the resale is a small portion of our business. So it's literally 2% of the business. We're working very hard to scale that. But it's worth it. We are all in. We are fully invested in it. But finding a way to integrate that business model in a way that is cost effective is a big challenge when you sort of have that moniker of trying to do the responsible thing.
And at Patagonia, is it also a cost center?
Yeah, I'll talk about two pieces. One is repair and the other is resale. So on the repair side, we operate, if it's not the biggest, it's one of the biggest apparel repair centers in North America. We employ over 100 people that do full-time product repair in Reno, Nevada. We also have repair vehicles that are on the road doing events, and we do it in retail, so that's just a part of it. We spend, I would estimate, about $20 million a year on product repair, and it's 100% an investment. So we're not making any money on that, and that's always been the model. On the resale side, our ambition is for that to be a profitable channel. And it's not because we need the profitability, it's to prove that this can be done so that ultimately it can scale. It represents about 1% of revenue today. We're continuing to invest actually right now through the fall in these 2-week release cycles where we're creating functionality on our website. It's probably the only flattering thing I'll say about Amazon, both tonight and ever, but the way that they make buying secondhand books accessible, I believe, must lead to a world where there's less virgin books printed. And that's the idea that we're aspiring for with apparel. And so the functionality, both logistically and technically, that we're seeking to roll out in our experience is, if you're looking at a black medium nano puff jacket, and we have that exact model secondhand, it will flag that item is available. If we have something similar, it will flag that we have something similar available. So we're trying to create that kind of visibility and optionality for our customers. And the big idea here is to try to create a model that has people thinking about, do I really need this? And if so, is there a secondhand option? And by the way, if they choose to buy something new or used, is it replacing something in their closet, and can we get it out of the closet into a more productive use as well? So that's ultimately the change we're trying to drive.
Yeah, I think some authors would not like that, but
Fair enough. And I was just going to say that the scalability of that and the combination of new and used is the business model that's going to have to be the case when you start talking about growth and degrowth and, carbon targets and all of those sorts of things. Some level of that is going to need to level out, but it's not there yet.
All right, really quickly, what do you need as a brand to have the infrastructure in place to do this at scale, just to put some ideas out there? Where should startups be investing the technology for take back or for cleaning or for returning yarn back into something that can be reused? Where are the biggest needs?
I think recyclability, and that's a very generic and broad term, but particularly in our space, it's around synthetics and it's around mixed materials. Those are the two most persistent problems that we navigate. And so there is a lot of technological advancement in those spaces, but I think we're still a decade from kind of having solutions that really create the sort of circularity of product in, product out that I think would serve us best.
Absolutely agree. The fiber to fiber recycling piece of it, where we can do it at scale without having to detrim and to know the componentry of the garments that are actually being recycled. It's a real sort of black hole right now, but that's the linchpin right there.
Before we get to our last topic, what is the most BS label out there? Is it conscious, eco-friendly? What are some of the other
Sustainable.
Okay. Any other labels that we should just absolutely
Green.
on clothing? And
look, maybe I'll answer the question differently and say this. You've made the point that it's incredibly complicated to understand how to make conscious purchasing decisions. I think that that's not an accident. And I think that the fact that there hasn't been kind of collaboration at an industry level, there also hasn't been collaboration at an industry level around creating policy that sets standards, I think is really a problem. And I think it's also really an opportunity. It's why we've been involved, both of our companies have been involved in trying to help influence the creation and ultimately the passage of the New York Fashion Act for 3+ years. I think that the industry needs policy and regulation to define what good looks like in a relatively, if not perfectly, level playing field. But I don't think it's an accident that customers find it so confusing to navigate their shopping experience, particularly in apparel.
Agreed. It's the standards, the definition. Often, even when we're trying to figure out what to call the products that we're making, we're grading our own papers, so to speak. I mean, we're using our own definitions of good and green and sustainable and all those things. So policy and standards, 100%.
both companies are pretty unapologetic when it comes to taking a stance on civic engagement and especially directing voters toward specific party specific values. Patagonia today released a new campaign around the election. We have some video. I'm going to roll it first and then we'll talk. That's smart brevity right there. I mean, if you need anything. I recently wrote a story looking at some data from Gallup. Just 38% of the public now think that businesses in general should take a public stance on current events. And that is down 10 percentage points from 2022. And neither brands are backing down from this. Why?
It's too urgent. The problem is too large. The urgency is there. We have been at Eileen Fisher, certainly at Patagonia, speaking out for decades about climate change, climate realities, social welfare, all of those things. And when you look at what's happening right now, you look at the political landscape, you look at the issues that are on the ballot, this is absolutely not the time to be silent, regardless of that sentiment. It's been a part of the values of Eileen's company for years. It's her personal values, and this is just not the time to sit it out.
Okay.
I would say this, first of all, I think that the positions that you've both taken at Eileen Fisher and articulated in the long form way that you've done it, I think are commendable. I think it's incredible. I think we take a sort of a visual approach to this. To try to kind of reach out to our customers and recognize that the messages don't land with everybody. But I'll say this, number one, we're a 51-year company. We took out ads in the local Ventura newspapers in 1978, that's 45 years ago, give or take, suggesting that people in the community made their voting, first of all, voted, and second of all, made decisions based on what was best for the local community through the lens of environmentalism. Since 2000, we have been steadily encouraging our customers and communities around the world to vote the planet. In 2016, we co-founded Time to Vote, thinking that maybe we could get together 100 companies to encourage their employees to have access to voting. We ended up today, there's over 2,000 companies that are a part of that, and that movement continues to grow. And so, we have, for a couple of election cycles, have closed our entire business, retail stores included, to make sure that our employees have access to voting. This year, we're actually doing that on October 29th, which is pre-voting or early voting day, and we're encouraging our employees and our communities to get active in helping ensure that others have access to vote. That is often described as partisan. I just see it as practical.
And I don't want to leave out Eileen Fisher. You also the brand released this year's sort of election push and the messaging there. If you want to go through that a little bit.
Your choice has power, and it's about the issues that are relevant in this particular one. And to your point, this is not meant to be more divisive. It's not meant to be inflammatory. It is about, Eileen has stood for values and has tried to create a values-driven company, and this election is way more about values than it is about politics.
Before we get to the fun question, when you look at John Deere, Ford, Harley Davidson releasing public statements that state we are taking a step back from DE&I, what goes through your mind? Is there now an emergence of red companies and blue companies?
You know, I think I'd love to tell you no, but I don't really believe that. I think that...
So yes, there's an emergence of red companies.
I want to be real careful in not painting those three companies as one or the other, because that's not my place. What I would say is this: our society and our culture is more polarized now than ever. I think that there is a real scorched earth approach that, particularly around the campaigns against those three companies, each of which has weathered that differently. I think the first folded quickly, the second shortly thereafter, and the third stood in there a bit longer and focused on the substance of their commitments, not necessarily all the language around it. I think that it is incredibly unfortunate that companies taking positions on issues that are for the betterment of everybody are all of a sudden defined as political or polarizing. And at the same time, I really appreciate the exhaustion that everybody is feeling through what the country has navigated for the last 8 or 10 years. And so it's difficult, but if your question is a bit more direct on what is Patagonia going to do, we're going to continue to show up with a clear orientation about we're in business to save our home planet. The environmental lens will lead, and the other area that we're incredibly focused on is supporting our employees. That's who we are. That's what we do for 51 years and for the next 51, come hell or high water.
Did you want anything to add, Lisa?
Exactly the same approach. Eileen has had, values that stood for climate, for social, for women's empowerment, and all of those things are on the ballot this time around, and we will continue to speak out on them and ask people to make choices based on those values that are hopefully their values.
I'm standing in the way between drinks. I realize that one fun question for each of you. My partner and I, we get into fights all the time. I'm on the brink of divorce every time he wants to throw something out because I want to hold on to it. What is one thing that you have held on to that you are proud of, or that you feel a little embarrassed saying that you've held on to it for so long for sustainability or responsible reasons?
I mean, I can tell you, just since it's between the three of us, I've got this old blue Patagonia fleece that is, God, it's ugly. But I've had the thing for decades and done climbing trips in Northwest China and different places in it. So I've got all these old photos and memories and everything else. And so from a functionality perspective, I got a lot of things that perform better today. From a fashion perspective, it may be the most god-awful piece in my entire house, but I've held on to it for those
You'll have
reasons.
to post it online. What about you, Lisa?
It's going to have to be a Patagonia product too. It's an old pair of ski pants that my children are appalled that I wear. They're so old that they should come with an underwire. They are crazy, but they still work. And just on principle, those are the ones that I'm going to wear until I can no longer wear them.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us, Lisa and Ryan. Thank you as well for joining us live here in person and online. Don't forget, tomorrow morning we have a live viewing of Biden's United Nations address, followed by in-person analysis with guests from the White House and the UN. And in the afternoon, we have the youngest Nobel Prize laureate in history, Malala Yousafzai. She is joining us for a special conversation. So if you'd like to catch that, watch it online or try to come back here tomorrow. Thank you all so much. Enjoy.